The night air in Chicago bit through the thin jacket of Ethan Carter, a 15-year-old black teenager who had been homeless for almost a year. The streets weren't kind, especially not to kids like him. His shoes were worn, his backpack nearly empty, and his stomach growled louder than the traffic rolling past. Ethan wasn't homeless because he was lazy. Life had been cruel. His mother died when he was young, and his father, after years of struggling with low-paying jobs, lost their apartment. By the time his father passed away, Ethan had nobody left. He tried foster care, but the system failed him. He slipped through the cracks until the streets became his only home. Every night, Ethan curled up in the corner of an abandoned bus stop, clutching his backpack like a shield. The city moved on without noticing him, and sometimes he wondered if he was invisible. But Ethan wasn't bitter. Despite hunger gnawing at him, despite the loneliness, he held on to something most people in his situation had lost: hope. One freezing morning, as Ethan searched trash bins for bottles he could recycle, he noticed something lying on the sidewalk near a cafe: a leather wallet. Scuffed at the edges, but still sturdy. Curious, he picked it up. Inside was a stack of cash, at least $300. For Ethan, it felt like a fortune. His stomach clenched at the thought of hot food. For a brief moment, temptation whispered, this money could buy meals for weeks. But then he saw something else, an old photograph tucked inside. A picture of a young woman holding a baby, faded and creased with time. Ethan's chest tightened. Whoever owned this wallet clearly loved the people in this picture. He knew what it felt like to lose someone. He couldn't keep it. Ethan zipped the wallet into his backpack. I'll find the owner, he muttered to himself. Even though he was hungry, even though life had never been fair to him, Ethan chose honesty. Later that afternoon, Ethan spotted an elderly white man standing at the corner of a busy street, looking flustered as he patted his coat pockets. His silver hair blew in the wind, and his cane wobbled slightly as he tried to balance. He looked lost, frustrated, and deeply worried. Ethan's instincts told him this had to be the wallet's owner. Slowly, he approached. Excuse me, sir. Did you lose this? He held out the wallet. The old man froze, eyes widening. He snatched it gently, flipping it open. Relief washed over his face when he saw the photograph still tucked inside. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me." For Ethan, the man's gratitude was enough. He nodded, ready to walk away. He didn't expect anything in return. But as he turned, the man's sharp, weathered eyes lingered on him, on his thin frame, the worn-out shoes, the exhaustion written across his face. "Wait, son," the man said, his voice trembling but firm. "What's your name?" "Ethan," he replied softly. The man studied him for a long moment, his grip tightening on the wallet. Something about Ethan's quiet strength stirred something deep inside him. The old man introduced himself as Henry Whitmore, a retired businessman in his 70s. His clothes were plain, his manner humble. Nobody watching would have guessed the truth, that Henry was one of the wealthiest men in Chicago. But Ethan didn't know that yet. "Come with me," Henry said, gesturing toward the cafe. Ethan hesitated, embarrassed. He didn't belong in fancy places. But the old man's eyes were kind, and hunger gnawed at him. Slowly, he followed. Inside, Henry ordered him a hot meal: scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and orange juice. Ethan devoured the food, tears stinging his eyes. He hadn't eaten like this in months. Henry watched in silence, his expression unreadable. He had seen greed before, people chasing wealth, exploiting others for gain. But this boy? He could have taken the money and run. Instead, he chose honesty, even when he had nothing. Henry thought, this boy is different. After breakfast, Henry walked Ethan outside. The snow had started falling lightly, dusting the streets in white. You could have kept the money, Henry said quietly. Why didn't you? Ethan shrugged. Because it wasn't mine, and somebody might have needed what was inside. Henry nodded slowly. Few adults he knew would have said the same. Then Henry's tone changed. Do you trust me, Ethan? Ethan hesitated. Life on the streets had taught him not to trust easily. But something in the old man's voice felt genuine. He nodded. Henry smiled faintly. Good, because I'm going to change your life. The snow thickened as Henry hailed a cab. Ethan hesitated when Henry gestured for him to get inside. He wasn't used to people inviting him anywhere, especially not strangers who looked like they belonged in warm houses, not cold sidewalks. Still, he slid into the back seat. The cab smelled of old leather and coffee. Henry gave the driver an address on the north side of Chicago, an area Ethan had never seen before. As the cab wound through streets, Ethan pressed his forehead against the glass, watching skyscrapers give way to rows of grand brownstones. He felt like he was in another world. But in his heart, unease stirred. Why me? He wondered. Why would an old man care about a kid like me? The cab stopped in front of a large, ivy-covered estate. To Ethan, it looked like something out of a movie. High gates, long driveway, lights glowing warmly through tall windows. Is this your house? Ethan whispered. Henry smiled faintly. One of them. Shock rippled through Ethan. He had expected Henry to be just another old man scraping by on retirement. Instead, this was something else entirely. But Henry didn't explain. Instead, he led Ethan inside. Past polished wood floors and portraits of ancestors who looked like they'd lived through centuries of privilege. The contrast between Ethan's ragged shoes and the marble tiles beneath them was so sharp, it made him dizzy. Henry guided Ethan into a small study lined with books. On the desk sat a small black leather pouch. Without explaining, Henry placed it in Ethan's hands. Inside, Henry said, is $5,000 in cash. I want you to hold on to it tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'll ask for it back. Ethan's stomach twisted. $5,000 could feed him for months. It could buy him warm clothes, maybe even a place to stay. The temptation screamed louder than ever. Henry studied him closely. He wasn't really testing the boy's ability to hold money. He was testing his character. Ethan nodded slowly, gripping the pouch like it was radioactive. Okay, he whispered. Henry gave Ethan a guest room for the night. It was the first time Ethan had slept in a real bed in months. Clean sheets, soft pillows, warmth. Yet he couldn't sleep. The pouch sat on the nightstand beside him, its weight heavier than gold. Every time he closed his eyes, he thought about what it could mean. No more hunger, no more shivering in bus stops. But then he remembered the look on Henry's face when he returned the wallet. The way the old man had clutched that photograph like it was life itself. Ethan sat up, staring at the pouch. It's not mine, he muttered. It's not mine. At sunrise, Henry knocked softly on the door. Ethan sat upright, the pouch still untouched on the nightstand. He handed it back without hesitation. Henry's eyes softened. Most adults he'd known, business partners, rivals, even friends, would have failed that test. But Ethan, a hungry, homeless teenager, he passed without question. Henry nodded, pride flickering in his gaze. "Good," he said quietly. "Very good." Over breakfast, Henry finally shared his own story. Years ago, he had built a business empire from nothing. But in the process, he lost what mattered most: family. His daughter had grown distant. His wife had passed away. And he realized too late that wealth couldn't buy back love. The photograph in his wallet? It was of his late wife and his daughter as a baby. Losing it would have broken him. "Money," Henry said, stirring his coffee slowly, "is the easiest thing to gain and the easiest thing to lose. But integrity? That's priceless. And you, Ethan, you have it." Ethan looked down, unsure how to respond. Nobody had ever said anything like that to him before. Just when Ethan thought the tests were over, Henry leaned back in his chair and made an announcement. "I want to offer you a job," he said. Ethan's eyes widened. "A job?" "Yes, but not here. I want you to work at one of my companies. You'll start small, janitorial work, delivery, anything that keeps you grounded. You won't tell anyone you know me. Nobody will know you're connected to me. I want to see how you handle real responsibility when nobody's watching." Ethan froze. It was overwhelming. One moment, he was a homeless kid. The next, he was being offered a chance at a new life. But there was something else too. Fear. What if he failed? What if he messed it up? Still, deep inside, hope sparked. For the first time in years, his life had a direction. Ethan started his new job the following Monday at a large logistics company, one of many owned quietly by Henry. To everyone else, Ethan was just a skinny black kid in oversized hand-me-downs, sweeping floors, and hauling boxes. Nobody knew he had the attention of the billionaire behind the curtain. The pay was small, but to Ethan, it was freedom. For the first time in months, he could buy his own meals and sleep in a tiny rented room instead of under bridges. Each dollar felt sacred, proof that he was clawing his way out of the shadows. But he didn't forget Henry's words. "Nobody will know you know me." Ethan was on his own here. The workplace wasn't kind. Some coworkers mocked him for being homeless. Others called him street rat or charity case. One supervisor, a tall white man named Carl, went out of his way to make Ethan's life miserable. "Move faster, boy," Carl barked one afternoon as Ethan hauled boxes twice his size. "Don't think because we gave you a job, you get to slack." The sting of racism in Carl's tone burned, but Ethan stayed quiet. He remembered nights on the street, the cold, the hunger. Compared to that, this was survivable. But Henry's silent test wasn't just about showing up to work. It was about showing who he really was when nobody had his back. Weeks passed. Ethan's small paycheck kept him afloat, but barely. Then one evening, while cleaning the break room, he found a black envelope left on a table. Inside was a company check worth $10,000. Nobody else was around. No cameras. His heart pounded. That money could change everything. Better clothes, a permanent home, maybe even college. But deep inside, the same voice echoed. "It's not yours." Ethan walked straight into the manager's office and handed it in. Carl snatched it from his hand, sneering. "You really are stupid, aren't you? Could have kept this, and no one would have known. Guess rats don't even know how to steal right." Ethan swallowed the insult and left without a word. What he didn't know was that Henry had arranged the lost check as another test. One Friday night, Carl framed Ethan for theft. A shipment of electronics had gone missing, and Carl pointed the finger straight at him. "He's homeless trash," Carl told the staff. "Of course he stole it. Look at him. He doesn't belong here." Security escorted Ethan out, his coworkers whispering, some with pity, others with smug satisfaction. Ethan's chest tightened with the familiar sting of humiliation. For a moment, he felt like that cold, unwanted boy on the streets again. But this time, he refused to break. The following Monday, the company held a board meeting. Ethan was ordered to appear, accused of theft in front of senior executives. He stood small, head bowed, while Carl painted him as a criminal. Then, the doors swung open. Henry walked in. The room fell silent. Everyone knew his face. Henry Lawson, billionaire investor, the man behind half the city's business empire. Carl stammered, "Sir, what are you doing here?" Henry's eyes landed on Ethan. "I came for him." Gasps rippled through the room. Ethan looked up, shock in his eyes. Henry turned to the board. "This boy is under my personal mentorship. And while you were all quick to judge him, I was the one testing him." Henry revealed everything. How Ethan had returned the lost wallet, resisted temptation with the pouch of cash, turned in the check without a second thought, and endured mistreatment without retaliation. "But you, Carl," Henry said, his voice sharp as steel, "chose to humiliate, demean, and falsely accuse a young man whose integrity is worth more than your entire career." Henry looked at security. "Escort him out. He's finished here." Carl's face drained of color. He tried to protest, but no one listened. He was dragged out in disgrace, the same way he had ordered Ethan to be. Henry placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You passed every test, son, and now I want to give you something more than a job." He handed Ethan a thick folder. Inside were documents, a scholarship to a top university, full living expenses covered, and a guaranteed position in one of Henry's companies upon graduation. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. He had never imagined a future like this. "You gave me back my wallet when you had nothing," Henry said softly. "Now I give you back your life, because you deserve it." Months later, Ethan sat in a college classroom, dressed sharply, a laptop open in front of him. His classmates saw him as just another student, but only he knew the path he had walked to get here. One evening, Henry invited him to the mansion again. This time, Henry introduced Ethan to his estranged daughter, the woman from the photograph Ethan had once returned. "This," Henry said proudly, "is the young man who reminded me that honesty and integrity still exist." The daughter smiled warmly at Ethan. "My father talks about you more than anyone else. Thank you for giving him hope again." Ethan realized then, his kindness had not only changed his own life, but it healed a broken family too. Ethan's story spread quietly through the company and beyond. People whispered about the homeless boy who turned down temptation, who endured cruelty, and who ended up with the support of a billionaire. It wasn't luck, it was integrity. And the lesson echoed loud. You don't need money to be rich. You need character.